All right, now let's take a look at an issue with this implementation. So here in the constructor of posts component, we're calling the get method of the HTTP object to get the posts from the server. As a best practice, constructors should be very small and lightweight. So we shouldn't perform expensive operations like calling the server. Then you might ask, when can we get these posts from the server? Well, components in Angular have what we call lifecycle hooks. So there are special methods that we can add to our component, and Angular will automatically call these methods at specific times during the lifecycle of a component. For example, when Angular creates a component, renders it, creates and renders its children, or when it destroys a component, these are examples of lifecycle events. At this point, Angular will call specific methods in our component if they are defined. One of these methods is OnInit. So earlier in the course, when we created a component with Angular CLI, you noticed that all our components had something like this: implements OnInit. So on Angular website, let's take a look at this OnInit interface. You can see this interface is defined in Angular/core library. And this is the shape of this interface. So this interface declares a method called OnInit, which takes no parameters and returns void. And this is the method that Angular will call when it initializes our component. So when we add implement OnInit to the declaration of a class, we're telling TypeScript compiler that this class should conform with the structure of the OnInit interface. In other words, we should have a method called OnInit. Now here we have a compilation error because we have not imported OnInit on the top. So let's import this. Now we have another compilation error. Class posts component incorrectly implements interface OnInit. Property OnInit is missing in type posts component. Now this error message has a problem because OnInit is a method, not a property. So if we simply add a method here, OnInit, you can see the compilation error is gone. So OnInit is an interface that we refer to as a lifecycle hook. There are multiple lifecycle hooks in Angular. For example, we have onChanges, doCheck, after content init, and so on. Each of these interfaces declare a method with the same name prefixed with ng. So for OnInit, we have a method called OnInit. Now technically, we don't necessarily have to add this implement OnInit on the top. As long as we have a method called OnInit defined in our class, Angular will automatically call this when it initializes our component. But we use implements keyword to add compile time checking. So when we add implements OnInit, TypeScript compiler ensures that we have a method called OnInit. Now I'm going to get all the code in the constructor, cut it, and simply move it here. Of course, we need to add this here because HTTP is no longer a parameter to this method. So here's the lesson. Do not call HTTP services in the constructor of your components. If you need initialization, use OnInit method.